don't understand that. And that revelation comes as a result of engaging continually in sincere devotional service. Okay, go ahead.
As stated in the Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 5, Chapter 18, Verse 12, Yasyasti Bhaktir Bhagavayatya
Yasyasti Bhakti Bhagavat Yakinchana Sarva Gunas Tatra Samasate Sura.
All the good qualities of knowledge develop in one who has attained the stage of devotional service. The principle of accepting a spiritual master, as mentioned in the 8th verse, is essential. Even for one who takes to devotional service, it is most important. Transcendental life begins when one accepts a bona fide spiritual master. The Supreme Personality of Godhead, Sri Krishna, clearly states here that this process of knowledge is the actual path. Anything speculated beyond this is nonsense.
So, therefore, anything beyond these 20 points is nonsense. So this raises a serious question. Should I send my child to public school or even a private school? Because the underlying philosophical basis of modern education is called secular humanism. Secular humanism means that there is no God and man has to rely simply on his own reason, logic, and science to understand the truth of life. So can a child actually be educated when the full philosophical basis of the whole educational system is atheistic? Answer, no. People say, wait a minute, what do you mean? I mean, my kid got a PhD from Harvard. Oh, yeah, maybe. But etat jnanam iti proktam ajnanam yad atonyata. As far as Krishna is concerned, all these I declare to be knowledge, and besides this, whatever there may be is ignorance. In other words, these 20 points are actual knowledge. Aman yidvam, adam yidvam, ahimsa santir arjavam, so forth. Humility, pridelessness, non-violence, tolerance, simplicity, approaching a bona fide spiritual master, etc. This is knowledge, not geometry, physics, mathematics, English, this thing, that thing. That's not knowledge. That keeps us entangled in the interactions of the 24 material elements. Does that mean that we shouldn't learn to read, that we shouldn't learn how to write or math, how to do math? No. See, the problem is how you're going to use knowledge. If we use knowledge to increase sense gratification, then that is a waste of time. If we use knowledge to glorify Krishna, that is real use of knowledge. So the scientists can glorify Krishna by doing scientific research to validate that Krishna is the origin of everything and the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The English poet can glorify Krishna. Instead of writing about Romeo and Juliet, they can write about Radharani and Krishna. Right? So they're still writing choice poetry and whatever, but instead of writing about a mundane relationship, they write about the most transcendental relationship of Radha and Krishna. So we see that great writers such as Vyasadeva, I mean, Shakespeare is like a mosquito next to Vyasadeva. Vyasadeva is one of the greatest poets and writers in all history. And Valmiki Muni, writing the Ramayana, in other words, exemplary, outstanding, super excellent literature. Not only is it good in terms of poetry, but the meaning is so profound that it can liberate a person from birth and death. That's real literature. So we have become dumbed down by secular humanism to think that real knowledge is rejection of God and complete reliance on faulty human reason logic and junk science.
As for the knowledge outlined here, the items may be analyzed as follows. Humility means that one should not be anxious to have the satisfaction of being honored by others. The material conception of life makes us very eager to receive honor from others. But from the point of view of a man in perfect knowledge who knows that he is not this body, anything, honor or dishonor pertaining to this body is useless. One should not be hankering after this material deception. People are very anxious to be famous for their religion, and consequently sometimes it is found that without understanding the principles of religion, one enters into some group which is not actually following the religious principles, and then wants to advertise himself as a religious mentor. As for actual advancement in spiritual science, one should have a test to see how far he is progressing. He can judge by these items. Nonviolence is generally taken to mean not killing or destroying the body, but actually nonviolence means not to put others into distress. People in general are trapped by ignorance in the material concept of life, and they perpetually suffer material pains. So unless one elevates people to spiritual knowledge, one is practicing violence. One should try his best to distribute real knowledge to the people so that they may become enlightened and leave the material entanglement.
This material entanglement.
That is nonviolence.
So here we see we're relearning the definition of words. And that's absolutely necessary because the words have been dumbed down also. Like, for example, Gandhi has dumbed down the meaning of nonviolence. His understanding of nonviolence is you protest politically without resorting to violent actions. That's not the real meaning of nonviolence, but that's the meaning that he has given to it by his example, and that's the meaning that's been embraced by most people in the world, and they glorify him as the paradigm of nonviolence. But that's not even close to what nonviolence is as described here. So what's the main point, however, is without humility one cannot even start to contemplate what is real knowledge. So therefore humility is number one point in order to learn properly what is real knowledge and differentiate that from junk knowledge. However, in modern today in education, they replace the word humility with self-esteem, and they teach kids who are totally unqualified to have tremendous self-esteem. So that falsified concept of self-esteem does not give them the humility to learn properly. Humility doesn't mean being shamed. Humility means not seeking to be honored by the service one renders. Therefore, and as Prabhupada said, anything, honor or dishonor, pertaining to this body is useless. So this self-esteem means being proud of the body and body relationships and success and sense gratification and so forth. That is not knowledge, and that's not the basis from which you can learn real knowledge. The basis from which we can learn real knowledge is becoming humble. Humble doesn't mean, we shouldn't take humble as meaning acquiescent, whatever anyone says you do, like jump off a bridge or drink this wine. That's not humble. Humble actually means not seeking to be honored by the service one renders. And it includes a lot of other things. Like, for example, Lord Chaitanya says, Trinadapi sunichena tarorapi saistana amanina manadina kirtaniya sadahari. In order to be able to chant Hare Krishna continually without any stoppage, it is necessary to become more humble than a straw in the street, more tolerant than a tree, devoid of all sense of false prestige, and ready to offer all respect to others. So here, that is the basis of, let's say, the mental preoccupation for learning. How does one do that? Well, the materialistic ego is such that we rejected God and we're willing to come to the material world and act as little gods. So therefore, right from time immemorial, we are not humble. We are arrogant and puffed up falsely with an illusory idea that we can be happy in the material world independent of God. That's why we're here. We're like criminals in a prison. Almost every criminal in the prison, if you interview them, they'll say, I was framed. I didn't do anything wrong. They put me in here unjustly. So we're also, when you're here, we've all come to the material world from the spiritual world because we became envious of God. Everyone said, what, me? Envious of God? I mean, I'm not envious of God. I don't even believe God exists. Well, that's enviousness of God, you see. So, a realistic evaluation of what our position is in the material world is necessary before anything else. And that is almost impossible without humility. So the whole thing that we learn in spiritual life is that we can never be equal or greater than Krishna. We're always subordinate to Krishna. And that is the poisonous thought that materialistic people reject. In fact, those religions that are popular in the modern world today, if a person wants to be religious, is religion without God, which is called Buddhism, New Age religion, and in Christianity it's Unitarianism. Those are all pseudo-religious paths in which there's no God. What is there? There's the attempt to become God by some method of meditation or exercise or something like that. So the self-improvement, self-help religions are very popular today. It's ideal for Kali Yuga because it's religion without God. That's why self-help books, self-improvement books, and self-improvement religions, the examples are Jainism and Buddhism. They're self-improvement religions. And they're religions without God. That's not to criticize their moral codes. Jainism and Buddhism have fantastic moral codes, but it's not religion in the sense of accepting that there's a supreme personality of Godhead and we're all servants of God, or subordinate to a particular identity or person. So here we see that the educational process does not begin until one becomes humble. And just the opposite is taught. to kids today through the false concept of self-esteem. Now, what is real self-esteem? Real self-esteem is to understand Jivera Swarupahaya Nityera Krishnadas. That my real position in life is I'm the eternal servant of Krishna. And not only I'm the servant of Krishna, I'm part and parcel of Krishna. That's real self-esteem. To know that we're never subject to birth and death. We're never separated from God. We're actually part and parcel of God. Mamaivam sa jivaloka jiva bhuta sanatana. Sanatana means eternal. We have eternal identity as the servant of God. And part and parcel means we are part of the whole. The part is never equal to the whole, but the part has exactly similar qualities to the whole. So we have many of the same qualities as Krishna does because we're part and parcel of Krishna. So that is real self-esteem. You see. So every word that's being used today has to be relearned by reading Bhagavad Gita. Every word, the meaning of these words that are used so commonly today, self-esteem, humility, non-violence, love, every one of those words is falsely defined by the gradual slippery slope of atheistic concepts. Therefore, the vocabulary, here we see there's 20 words that are being redefined. Not redefined. The original definition is being given. But each one of these words has been redefined and dumbed down and pejoratively presented by low-class behavior in modern society. Okay, good.
Okay, sorry. Tolerance means that one should be practiced to bear insult and dishonor from others. If one is engaged in the advancement of spiritual knowledge,
What happened to the microphone?
this is expected because material nature is so constituted. Even a boy like Prahlada, who only 5 years old.
What happened again? Don't press that button. Just leave it on. It has to be green color when it's on. Is it green? What? Then it's off. Press it. Okay, 1 second. Maybe the battery went dead. Yeah, the battery went dead. There's no energy. There you go. Thank you.
If one is engaged in the advancement of spiritual knowledge, there will be so many insults and much dishonor from others. This is expected because material nature is so constituted. Even a boy like Prahlada, who only 5 years old, was engaged in the cultivation of spiritual knowledge, was endangered when his father became antagonistic to his devotion. The father tried to kill him in so many ways, but Prahlada tolerated him. So there may be many impediments to making advancement in spiritual knowledge, but we should be tolerant and continue our progress with determination.
So someone would say, "Oh, wait a minute! You're teaching my kid to be tolerant. That means he has to tolerate abuse and bullying." I don't agree with this. I don't want my kid to be tolerant in the face of abuse and bullying and so forth. Yeah, okay. Fight all the time. just like there's a Chinese proverb, it takes two hands to clap. One cannot clap with one hand. So most of the time, you see that right from the beginning of life, and kids manifest this possessiveness. Just like on Christmas morning, all the kids run down and get the toys that are under the Christmas tree. And let's say there are two brothers. So one brother gets a book, and the other brother gets a remote control car. So the brother gets the book, looks at it, but then he sees the remote control car and with the remote control in the hand of his other brother, and he throws the book down and tries to grab the remote control, and then there's a fight. So you can see it right with little kids. I mean, did anyone teach them to be envious? Did anyone teach them to fight? No. It's a natural quality of a conditioned soul to have those types of feelings and act on them. So to become tolerant is absolutely important. Now, how can you go through life without having tolerance? Now, by practicing Krishna consciousness, the tolerance factor of a devotee becomes very important and increased. But a materialist, the tolerance factor is reduced to almost nil. Therefore, they're always getting into fights, always using inappropriate words, always seeking confrontation. Therefore, tolerance is extremely important if one wants to succeed in spiritual life. Now, how do you tolerate? Well, you cannot tolerate anything unless you have faith that God is my protector. If you don't have faith in God, you will not tolerate anything. You'll be fighting all the time. But when you understand that there's a special relationship between Krishna and his devotee, how do we know that? Well, look what Krishna did for Prahlad Maharaj. Look what he did for Kunti Devi. Look what he did for Draupadi. If you read the lives of those personalities, and the Pandavas, Arjuna, he saved them many, many times from death and even humiliation and so forth. So, how do you develop that faith? Because you will not be able to tolerate anything without that faith. You develop faith by associating with genuine devotees, not by phony devotees who talk the talk but don't walk the walk. Who can, just like if you see me giving a lecture here, and I say, no intoxication, and the next week you see me in a marijuana shop buying marijuana. Well, you'd say, wait a minute, this is a disconnect here. Just last week he told us we should not be taking intoxicated. Now he's in a marijuana shop buying marijuana. Well, that doesn't go. That doesn't connect. So, when we are humble and we have actual faith in Krishna, then we're not intimidated. We're not fearful. Because we know that Krishna is in my heart. Krishna is in the heart also of my enemy. Therefore, if I sincerely serve Krishna, then he'll protect me. Just like Haridas Thakur was living in a cave and chanting Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Approximately 23 and a half hours a day. It takes that long to chant 173 rounds. So, many people would come and visit him. But it so happened that there was a dangerous, poisonous snake and a big poisonous snake, like a cobra, living in the same cave. And oftentimes when Haridas Thakur would be chanting, or when he would speak to the guests, the snake would pop his head up, and people would be frightened out of their wits. So the snake became so frightening that the visitors to Haridas Thakur said, "Oh dear Haridas," he said, "we can't come and see you anymore." He said, "Oh, why?" He said, "We're frightened out of our wits from this snake. Every once in a while he pops up and looks around and slithers here and there. This is a dangerous cobra." He said, "Oh, I'm very sorry to hear that." So when he said that, soon after that, the snake slithered out of the cave and never came back again. Now, how did that happen? Does the snake understand Bengali? No. But Krishna is in the heart of the snake, just like he's in the heart of the living entity. And when he saw that his devotee would become inconvenienced, now Haridas Thakur was not inconvenienced by the snake, because he just tolerated it and depended on Krishna. But the other people were, and Haridas Thakur felt sorry that they would have to leave and not come back again. So Krishna inspired the snake to go away. Now that sounds like some kind of fictional story. It's not. You will see the same thing happen in your life, I guarantee you. If you have faith. Faith means you believe in something you don't see, but you know for sure it's there. And how do we know for sure? Because it's there in the Shastra, in the story of Haridas Thakur, the story of Draupadi, the story of Prahlad Maharaj, and so forth. So these are not fictional stories. They're factual histories of the lives of great devotees. And you'll see that great devotees have to tolerate a lot of nonsense. Like, for example, the Pandavas went through hell for 13 years. Absolute hell. But they tolerated it. The 13th year they had to be incognito and acted as servants. And they're kings. They had to act as servants. So they tolerated that. Why? Because they had complete faith in their gurus and in Krishna. And they came out of it. But then, as soon as they come out of those 13 years of hellish existence, they have to go through an 18-day war in which 640 million people were killed. Horrible, horrible war. And they saw their own children being slaughtered, with their heads cut off, and so many things they saw. But they tolerated it. And they did not shy away from their duty in life. And what is our ultimate duty? That is to serve Krishna and follow his instructions. So we see that life is not is actually not joyful in the material world. And Krishna says that. He says that life in the material world is anityam asukam lokam. He said this is a place of temporality, birth, death, old age, and disease, and asukam. And there's no real happiness in the material world as long as we're engaged in sense gratification. Now someone will say, "Oh, what do you mean? I just had a party last night. We had a great time." Yeah, that's true. But all of those great times are continually punctuated by some type of misery. And if you look at from the angle of an entire lifetime, most of life is suffering, even for people who say they're having a great time. Just like one example is, when I was a young boy, I went with my parents and my brothers to a New Year's Eve party. And I was just a little boy, and everyone were big adults. And when they all arrived in the party, they were all well dressed, and everyone was polite and smiling. As the evening progressed, they started drinking more and more and eating meat. And by 12 o'clock, people were fighting, throwing up, passed out. And I watched the whole thing. I was thinking to myself, wow, this is what a good time is. You know, I saw my uncle throwing up. Right. I saw two cousins of mine fighting, fist fighting. I saw some of my aunties screaming, trying to stop the fight. And I was thinking to myself, wow, this is a really good time. You know. But it's not a good time. The people became like animals at the end of the night. You know. So that's what material life is like. It begins like nectar, it ends up like poison. Whereas spiritual life begins like poison and ends up like nectar. So we have to think about that. Why does material life begin like nectar and end up like poison? Because material life, the real material life, is birth, old age, disease, and death. And none of those things is pleasurable. They're all miserable. I never saw a baby born laughing. Maybe you have. I never saw one born. I had 7 kids with my wife. And I've never seen people happy because they're sick or getting old or dying. When somebody's dying, everyone's crying and the person is like in a very bad state. So that's the real face of material life. However, when a person can tolerate these things and understand that the real purpose of life is to serve Krishna, then they have this internal happiness and satisfaction because they're actually using their time correctly. Therefore it says in the 5th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, Na prahishyet priyam prapya, no dvijet prapya cha priyam, stira buddhir asamudho, brahmavit brahmani stitaha. A person who neither rejoices upon achieving something pleasant, nor laments upon obtaining something unpleasant, who is self-intelligent, who is unbewildered, and who knows the science of God, is already situated in transcendence. And in the purport, Prabhupada writes, the symptoms of the self-realized person are given herein. This is the 5th chapter, verse 20, Bhagavad Gita. The first symptom is that he is not illusioned by the false identification of the body with his true self. He knows perfectly well that he is not this body, but is the fragmental portion of the Supreme Personality of God. In other words, part and parcel of God. So that's point 1, most important point. If you want to talk about self-esteem, this is real self-esteem, understanding I'm part and parcel of Krishna. He is therefore not joyful in achieving something, nor does he lament in losing anything which is related to his body. This steadiness of mind is called sthira buddhi, or self-intelligence. He or she is therefore never bewildered by mistaking the gross body for the soul, nor does he accept the body as permanent and disregard the existence of the soul. This knowledge elevates him to the station of knowing the complete science of the Absolute Truth, namely Brahman, Paramatma, and Bhagavan. He thus knows his constitutional position perfectly well without falsely trying to become one with the Supreme in all respects. This is called Brahman realization or self-realization. Such steady consciousness is called Krishna consciousness. So here's a description of a person who has become self-intelligent. Why? Because he knows that his self is eternally in a relationship with Krishna, the Supreme Self. That's called self-intelligence. It's not that selfish intelligence. Self-realization goes through 3 steps. Step 1, one understands the difference between the body and the soul. Step 2, one understands that the difference between the individual minute soul, us, and Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the super soul in the heart of every living entity. And number 3, he understands that the super soul, the living entities, the material creation, all incarnations, they all come from Krishna, who is called Swayam Bhagavan, the origin of everything. So those are the 3 fundamental steps of self-realization. So self-realization is not in a vacuum. We cannot understand ourselves without understanding our relationship with Krishna. And Krishna is always with us, whether we are in the material world or the spiritual world. There's no independent existence. In fact, we can't do anything without Krishna's help. This is real self-realization. Okay. Then it says, such a liberated person is not attracted to material sense pleasure, but is always in trance, enjoying the pleasure within. In this way, the self-realized person enjoys unlimited happiness, for he concentrates on the Supreme. So here's another fallacy of material life. People think that pleasure is without. That I have to go to Disneyland, or I have to go to Las Vegas, or I have to go to this bar or this party to be happy. But they're looking for happiness outside. But the real happiness is within. We should learn to excavate our body, our heart, because it says, Sarva Shichaham Hridi Sanivisto Matak Smritir Jnanam Apahanam Cha. I am in the heart of every living entity, and from me comes knowledge, remembrance, and forgetfulness. So if we go inside, we will find Krishna. If we go outside, we'll find Mickey Mouse and Donald Duck. So you have to decide which one you want to find. It's also possible to find Krishna outside, because he explains in the 7th chapter, Rasoham apsukonteya pravasmi sasisuraya pranavasarvavedesu sabde ke purusham risu. And I am the taste of water. So every time you drink water, and you get the taste of the minerals, just like sometimes you see these bottles of water, and it says contains magnesium and contains calcium and contains phosphorus and so forth. That's Krishna, right? Because Krishna says, "Bhumir apo nalo vayu kammano buddhire vacha hankara iti hamme bina pakritirastata." I am earth, water, fire, air, ether. So I am the earth. These are my separated eternal energies, apara prakriti. So those earth elements, calcium, magnesium, that's Krishna. So when water filters through or percolates through the earth into an underground aquifer, and then there's a spring, and that water gurgles up, and there's a spring water, the taste of that water is Krishna. You say. So rasoham apsukonte. So every time you taste water, you should say, what should you say, Sanskriti? Yes. And every time you see a living entity, what should you say? Look in your notes. It starts with a B. Yes. Bijam mam sarvabhutanam. Krishna says, and I am the source of all existence, or I'm the seed-giving father of all existence. You say, so if you read the 7th chapter, verses 8 to 13 or 11, it teaches you how to see Krishna outside in material nature. So he's inside and outside. But we want to actually see Paramatma within our heart, or see Krishna within our heart. Just like the gopis, they were always seeing Krishna within and without. So when they saw Narayana, while they were running through the forest looking for Krishna, they saw Narayana. They were respectful, but they were not interested in Narayana. They wanted to see Krishna holding the flute. So when you fix Krishna in your heart, that's why we have the deity and we have darshan. We can fix our eyes on Radha and Krishna. And if we can hold that picture of Radha and Krishna within our mind, in our heart, all day long, that means we've become Krishna conscious. And then we actually see the same Radha and Krishna in the heart of every living entity. That means we have become, we have universal vision of the Lord. Sahasra Sirsa Purushaha. We're seeing the Lord present in the heart of every living entity and in every atom of the universe. Then we've become completely Krishna conscious. Okay, so coming back to this purport. If one is non-violent, real non-violence is disseminating Krishna consciousness, or teaching Krishna consciousness to all people, regardless of what they look like, whatever the color of their skin is, or what their ethnic background is, or what their religion is, or what their religion isn't. One dedicates themselves to spreading Krishna consciousness. Why? Because this is the ultimate order of Krishna. Sometimes people say, oh, well, Krishna was present with Arjuna 5,000 years ago, that's why Arjuna is Krishna conscious. But he's not present today, so how can I become Krishna conscious? I don't know what he wants me to do. Arjuna knew what he had to do. Krishna was speaking to him, but I don't know what he wants me to do. That's not true. Krishna has told us in Bhagavad Gita what we should do. Ya idam paramam guyam mad bhaktesu abhidasyati bhaktim mai param kritva mam ivaisasya samsaya nachatasman manisyesu kaschit me priya kritama bhavita nachame tasmad anya priyataro bhuvi. 18th chapter, verses 68 and 69. Krishna says, for one who explains this supreme secret, Raja Guyam. What does Raja Guyam mean in Sanskriti? No. The most secret of all secrets. What's king of knowledge? Raja. Yes, Raja. Yeah, so this is the most secret of all secrets. So it says, for one who explains this supreme secret, which is what? Bhagavad Gita. Why is it a supreme secret? Why does it say secret? Well, it's not secret. Prabhupada translated it and gave the proper purport. But it remains a secret as long as we're attached to sense gratification. We can read it, but we won't understand it. Therefore, it's called a secret. But it's an open secret. If you give up sense gratification, you'll understand it easily. The only thing holding us back is our attachment to sense gratification. So it says, for one who explains this supreme secret to the devotees, pure devotional service is guaranteed, and at the end, that person will come back to me. There is no servant in this world more dear to me than he or she, nor will there ever be one more dear. So this is Krishna's order to us. He's speaking to us today. If you want to please the Lord, just like Arjuna wanted to please the Lord, Krishna said, fight, but without any personal attachment. Just fight to please me. Well, here Krishna is saying, you want to please me? You learn Bhagavad Gita and you teach others. Then there's no one dearer to me. Anya priyataro bhuvi. Priyataro means no one dearer to me than he or she in this world. Okay. So go ahead.
Simplicity means that without diplomacy...
Did you read tolerance? Yeah, you did, huh?
Yes, sir.
Okay, go ahead.
Simplicity means that without diplomacy, one should be so straightforward that he can disclose the real truth even to an enemy.
You know what diplomacy means? Anybody? Huh? No. No. Yes.
Diplomacy is the art where you try to show the truth but cause the just to serve your own needs.
That's a pretty good definition.
Politicians can do that.
Yeah, diplomacy means you convince another person by using very clever language where sometimes you also lie. But you do it in such a clever way. The other person doesn't realize it. And they become convinced to do your, follow your, point of view. And when you're diplomatic, I'll give you an example of diplomacy. There was this one country accused of genocide. And they said, no, there was no genocide. There was simply a transfer of population. Well, yeah, but in the process of transferring the population, they all died. But they don't refer to it as genocide. They refer to it as transfer of population. So that's diplomatic verbiage, language, where you say something, just like, for example, I was speaking to this lady once, and the topic of abortion came up, and she told me, "Oh, I've had 5 abortions in my life, and I'm very proud of it." So I said, you murdered 5 times. No, what do you mean murdered? It's just a little piece of skin, right? She referred to the fetus as just a little piece of skin, right? So I said, well, yeah, but if you stand on a corner of a city street and you put a knife to your pinky and you say you're going to cut off the first phalange of your pinky, and you just say it's just a little piece of skin, what would people do who watch you? They would immediately call the psychological evaluation group or an ambulance to come and stop you from doing it, or the police, because they would say you're crazy, and the people in general would say you're crazy, cutting off a part of your body, right? So see, what they do is, that's diplomatic language. It's just a little piece of skin. So, a little piece of skin is nothing, right? So it's not, there's no real crime involved. There's no murder involved. But yeah, the little part of this finger is just a little piece of skin, right? But if you try and cut it off, people will think you're crazy, right? It's self-mutilation. So that's the same. So it depends on how and what kind of language you use. So diplomatic language masks the real meaning of something and bewilders people into believing something that usually is not true. And those persons who are diplomatic, you can use diplomacy to further Krishna consciousness also, just like the Goswamis were excellent at using diplomacy. They had to deal with Muslim rulers in India and antagonistic Muslim rulers like Aurangzeb. But they were so diplomatic that they were able to deal with them and usually get what they wanted. What did they want? They wanted to buy stone to build a temple. But in those days, you could only buy stone with government permission. And the government would never give permission. There was a Muslim government. They would never give permission for Hindus to build temples. In fact, they were knocking down temples all the time, right? The Muslims knocked down 40,000 temples in India. 40,000 temples. Yeah. So, but the Goswamis were able to negotiate with them in Delhi and convince them to give them stone to build a temple. That's how brilliant they were. Well, of course, Sanatana and Rupa Goswami were the chief ministers under the Muslim government of Nawab Hussain Shah in Bengal. So they knew how to talk, but then after they became sannyasis, they used that art of diplomacy in order to further Krishna consciousness. But in general, diplomacy is not a good thing, because you say one thing, but you usually mean something else. So it's not actually a good thing. But even that can be used in Krishna consciousness by someone who's an expert. So if you're not an expert, you should not even attempt doing anything like that. Okay. So, go ahead, finish.
As for the acceptance of a spiritual master, that is essential, because without the instructions of a bona fide spiritual master, one cannot progress in the spiritual science. One should approach the spiritual master with all humility and offer him all services, so that he will be pleased to bestow his blessings upon the disciple. Because the bona fide spiritual master is a representative of Krishna, if he bestows any blessings upon his disciples, that will make the disciple immediately advanced, without the disciples following the regulative principles, or the regulative principles will be easier for one who has served the spiritual master without reservation.
Right, so here this is very important. Simplicity, the Sanskrit word is arjavam, and the meaning is extended into honesty. So simplicity means what you see is what you get, what you hear is the raw truth. There's no diplomacy involved. So simplicity means that without diplomacy, one should be so straightforward that he can disclose the real truth even to an enemy. So therefore, you see the word simplicity, as Prabhupada is using it. Usually simplicity in English, you think of the word simpleton, an idiot. But actually, Prabhupada is defining it in terms of straightforwardness, speaking the truth honestly and not abusively. There's an art of how to speak. It's explained in the 17th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, where it says that the austerity of speech is speaking the truth in a pleasant way. In other words, anuvegam karam vaikyam satyam priyahitam chaya sadyaya vyasanam chaiva ibanmana tapa uchyate. Austerity of speech consists in speaking words that are truthful, pleasing, beneficial, and not agitating to others, and also in regularly reciting Vedic literature. Now, speaking the truth should not be done in a way to hurt or punish a person. It should be done to edify a person. And that depends a lot on the body language and the tone by which the truth is spoken. So here we see, Prabhupada writes, one should not speak in such a way as to agitate the minds of others. Of course, when a teacher speaks, he can speak the truth for the instruction of his students, but such a teacher should not speak to those who are not his students if he will agitate their minds. So there was one person here, and some time ago, they were just walking into the temple, and they saw a young boy and his mother at the entrance, and they started speaking right away to them. And this person loves to speak philosophy, so this person started speaking philosophy to the young boy. And at one point, he wasn't that young, he was like 19, and at one point he said, "I'm not interested in one word that you're saying." And this person became angry and started speaking harshly to the boy. And this just convinced him more that he's not interested in one word she was saying, and not interested at all in Krishna consciousness. And the mother was horrified because she purposely brought her boy to the temple to get good association, because she saw that he was drifting away from his upbringing and belief in God. Well, what do you expect? He went through 19 years of public education. So the mother told me later on that when the boy was younger, he was a genuine devotee. He was very sincere. He would chant. He would do it. But now he's in college, and he came home and told his mother, "I don't believe in God anymore." So that's what happens. You go through school in the United States and in India now, same thing. So I had to convince this person, but it took me a long time, that what they did was a travesty of preaching. It wasn't actual real preaching, because they just convinced the boy more to remain an atheist and to reject Krishna consciousness. And here it says, of course, when a teacher speaks, he can speak the truth for the instruction of his students, but such a teacher should not speak to those who are not his students if he will agitate their mind. So this is the mistake that person made. This is penance as far as talking is concerned. Besides that, one should not talk nonsense. The process of speaking in spiritual circles is to say something upheld by the scriptures. One should at once quote from scriptural authority to back up. So, you see, one should not speak in such a way as to agitate the minds of others, and one should not speak to someone who's not their student if they will agitate their mind. So we see that there's a big responsibility, and it requires a lot of skill to know how to preach. And unless a person is trained, they can, in the name of preaching, turn away thousands of people from Krishna by thinking they're doing the right thing, but actually they're doing the wrong thing. You see? That's why it's important to come to class. Yeah. Yes. And if they remember a bad experience, that'll take them through life to avoid Krishna consciousness. Yeah. Okay, we'll stop right there. Are there any questions? This is a big subject. We only got a few parts of this purport. This is like a 6-page purport. We've only read 1.5 pages. Are there any questions or comments? Yes. You put on the brakes. Do you have any brakes? If you don't, then you should buy new brake pads. Put on the brakes. You got to know when to stop. First of all, there's a saying in my language: before you go in, think about how you're going to get out. So, before you start preaching to someone, you should read the 14th chapter of Bhagavad Gita and learn how to evaluate a person's degree of entanglement in material life by the modes of material nature in 30 seconds. That's what you learn by reading the 14th chapter of Bhagavad Gita carefully and being instructed in it. You will learn to evaluate how much a person is affected by Maya in 30 seconds. Not 31, not 29, but 30 seconds. Unless you know how to do that, and you have that art of evaluation, it's very likely that you'll get into unpleasant situations with people that you're preaching to and end up having the opposite effect of what you want. Therefore, see, Bhagavad Gita is the most profound book. Why? When I say most profound, Srimad Bhagavatam is the most profound book. But Bhagavad Gita is a lot shorter than the Srimad Bhagavatam. But it contains all the knowledge of Bhagavatam. And this is a book that you could actually read in this lifetime and assimilate it. Bhagavatam, it's not sure you'll be able to read the whole thing and assimilate it. But Bhagavad Gita, you can. And if you spend the time to assimilate the knowledge in Bhagavad Gita, you're completely educated in Krishna consciousness. So, the 14th chapter explains how to evaluate the degree to which a person is affected by the modes of material nature. And this is a great science. It's like, reading the pulse of a person, right? In India, Ayurvedic doctors can spend 10, 20 years mastering the art of taking the pulse of a person and understanding where the sickness is. And by the way, the pulse reading diagnosis is usually 60% correct. All the diagnosis that people do, like in hospitals, like taking the blood, taking the saliva, analyzing the urine, analyzing the tongue, this thing, that thing, is usually about 40% correct in diagnosis. The pulse reading has a higher percentage of correct diagnosis than all the techniques that they're using in the hospitals. Right? But if you become an expert in the 14th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, you'll be up to 90-95% correct diagnosis of how much a person is affected by the modes of material nature. And then you can figure out from that point on what dosage of Krishna conscious knowledge that person is able to assimilate in their particular situation at that time. You'll be able to give them the right dosage, because the radiologist, if the radiologist makes a mistake, radiologists are people that shoot other people up with drugs, anesthetics, anesthesia and so forth. If they make a mistake, they kill someone. There was this one nurse, it was a man, whatever hospital he worked in, the number of people dying, the average number of people dying went up tremendously. So at first they didn't notice it, but then after he switched hospitals 5-6 times, they noticed the pattern. And they started watching him carefully. He was purposely killing people by overdosing them with sedatives and anesthetics and things like that. What? This was, I think it was in England. Yeah. The same thing happens in America. But this guy was good at it. He got away with it for a long time. They usually catch people faster in America, but this guy was very, very good at it. Yeah. And he kept changing hospitals. He knew when to stop and change the hospital, right? Transfer to another hospital. I think he killed about 40, 50 people. There are people like that in this world. It's horrible. Yeah, because as soon as you stick a needle, by the way, in the Vedic, Ayurvedic system, sticking needles in the body is not allowed. It's a very dangerous thing. As soon as they stick a needle in the body, if they make a little mistake, they can kill you. Okay. Or, drawing blood from the body also is a questionable thing. Many, in earlier years when AIDS first became known, a lot of people who had AIDS or didn't know they had AIDS were giving blood to blood banks, and the blood banks didn't know how to analyze the blood for AIDS. So there was a certain number of people that got AIDS by getting blood transfusions. You know, and it took them time to figure out how did they get AIDS, you know, and then they saw the pattern. It was coming from tainted blood, and they were taking blood from people that would walk off the street, and in places where there was high incidence of AIDS, the blood bank blood became contaminated with AIDS, and then people got AIDS by getting it, those infusions. So you see, anytime you stick a needle in the body, it's a very dangerous thing. Hare Krishna. Shri Radha Nilama.